Okay, so we are just putting in our flat color behind our vector line art. And this is flat local color, the color the things actually are. Now, Nico has a white tank top. And even the whites need to be painted in. That's why our blank white layer is locked. So when we paint with white, we simply choose white as our color. And then we use our magic wand, and we go to the black bread layer, the line art layer. And then we use our paint bucket, and we go to the flat color layer, and we fill it in. So now you don't see the checkered box behind the tank top anymore. It means that's filled in with white. Same thing with the eye, I can do that. But I have to select it first. And even the inside of the eye, the little dot, because remember the only things that are in the vector are the black shapes. So now I go to the flat color layer and I drop it in with my paint bucket. Okay, the helmet is gray. I was going to pick kind of a nice warm gray. And the helmet has some shapes that are not contained. Almost every shape I did was really contained, but look at this highlight in the helmet is not contained, it's open. So when I click it, it goes to the next contained shape. And I'm just going to fill the helmet. I'm going to select all of these different shapes, even though I'll vary the different grays later. It would still be flat color if I varied the grays now. But first I'll just select them all and then fill them all with that one gray on my flat local color layer. And I don't even particularly like that gray. But the beauty of filling in all your flats like this, it's called flatting. And remember the white is one of those too. Is that now I can simply go in with just my paint bucket on my flat local color layer. I can find different grays. Maybe kind of a more steely, lighter gray. And I can just drop it in. And it will replace what was already there. So this is starting to hint at the next thing we're going to do, which is called duotone coloring, which takes the flat local color and it splits it into highlights and shadows. So ranges of a color. So I'm just going to do a few different flat grays here. Be a darker one for this band. Yeah, that's starting to work. Okay, and now the only one that's left is the plumage. And the plumage is a lighter, I think the way I designed it, is it darker or lighter on the inside? It's up to whatever you want to do for your coloring. I think I'm going to make it lighter. No, maybe darker. Try darker. I'm going to go for a slightly darker bluish green. And I'm going to select both of these shapes. Remember, hold down Shift to add to your selection from my black line layer. Then I'm going to go to my flat local color layer, and I'm going to drop them in. Now, this is interesting because these shapes are internal shapes, kind of like the eyeball. You see how they're already contained by a filled color? But by always selecting it from my vector line art first, it leaves gaps for my black lines. But if it was totally contained, I'm going to go backwards a little bit in my history before I filled those paint buckets. If instead of selecting it from my vector layer, because it's already contained by the bigger green shape, I could just use without any magic wand, I could just use the paint bucket right into the flat local color layer and it will just fill up that whole space. So the difference is having that cushion of the lines or not. So once you kind of understand how it works, you'll be able to flat color in no time. So I've got the flat color. Now it's time to save it. It's going to be a PSD file. Remember, it's in 3 layers. And I'm going to change my pure white shirt, which doesn't show up on a white background, to being just a slightly creamy off-white. A little bit brighter than that. Just so it does show up on a white background. Okay, so I've got my flat colors. I've got them saved. That meets all the requirements of the assignment. It's just not all that super interesting. So now I can start to have some fun with the coloring. That's what a coloring book's all about. And we are going to start playing with the next option, besides just flat local color. And we're going to start playing with lights and darks in the color. This is called Duotone Color, or Duotone Flat Color. So remember earlier when I took the blue of the wing, this is the local flat color, and I decided I wanted a darker blue on the further back wing? That is an aspect of duotone color, right? It's taking the blue and saying that there are lights and shadows to it. But I don't want to mess with my flat color layer. Instead, what I want to do after I've saved it is to duplicate it, Command J. And then I'm going to change it to my duotone highlights layer. So duotone, it means it splits the local color into lights and shadows. So if I made a duplicate, how can I make it into the highlights? Well, I just go to Image Adjustments, right from our compositing. I go to Levels, and I'm just going to take that mid-tone slider and basically brighten all of those flat colors. And then in order to get the duotones, I'm just going to start with duotone hard edge, which is a lot like animation. So I'll show you some examples of duotone hard edge. Let's see, where are they? Right there. After you have your local color, you can just cut out the shapes where you want the shadows to be. So where do I want shadows? Well, I want shadows on this wing around his head. So I'm just going to do it with my lasso. I'm just going to hit delete. And that's going to cut out that duotone shadow shape. And I can do it with my eraser tool as well. I just kind of like how clean the lasso makes it. Anywhere I might want a shadow to show. And I can even do it across multiple flat colors, like the cream color of the shirt and the blues of his waist. This will cut across all of them, and you see it gives me slight duotones on everything. In the helmet, where do I want the shadows? Maybe I want a shadow back here. Maybe I want a shadow under here. So this is cut edge or hard edge duotone. This will be a little trickier inside the wing. Get to play with some color shapes. Remember, this can all be modified later and worked with. That's why we do it on a duplicate layer. We're never going to lose our local flat color. It's there. Now we're just playing with some shaped highlights. And just like you hope your coloring book line art inspires the second graders to have fun, I hope that your line art can inspire you to have some fun. Almost there. So the brighter your local flat color is, the more subtle the variation will be. Like in the shirt, it's very subtle. On the bright parts of the helmet, it's very subtle. But especially when you print, the subtleties can really make a big difference. Like for the plumage, what kind of shapes do I want? Maybe to make it look a little bit more feathery. Cut out that internal shape. If that's too much, I can go backwards and I can use Option to subtract from the selection. Get a different duotone shape. Something like that. Maybe the underside of the feet. So you're actually making creative selections. And drawing the shapes you want to bring out with your coloring. All right, so that's a really quick way to add some duotone highlights. Then of course you can also add them in a more direct way. I can just lasso in an area and then I can drop in a color that I choose, like a really bright gray right into this spot. And of course you can kind of clean it up. You can even use the direct painting tools. You can even hold down Option to steal the color that's there and just paint with it with a basic brush. It's always going to be behind your line art, so you don't need to worry about it. This is a hard edge brush for the hard edge duotone. All right. I think it's only the beak I didn't cut any away from, so let me do a little bit of that. Inside the logo. So now we have two layers. We have the highlights for the duotone, and we have the flat color underneath. So the two of them together give us duotone flat color. That's hard edged, and in the next video I'll show you something about soft edged and gradations. So always save your work, and that's where we'll pick it up.